if I didn't find Jordan Peterson in 2017, my pre-transition self would have had to invent one, basically. I'm video editing with a 2012 version of iMovie on a 2013 MacBook Pro that can't actually even run Netflix anymore. So my limits are limiting. Jordan Peterson made me trans, and I hate Mondays. It's a Hello Kitty mug, everyone. Yay! I've been drinking a lot of tea for my voice. I don't know if it's helping, but it's definitely making me piss. I feel like for a couple of years now, since I really removed myself from the content of the manosphere, that it always felt like an incomplete breakup to me. Like, I was really dedicated and sort of a Jordan Peterson stan, really between 2017 and 2020 or 2021. I think I feel like my soul is sort of stained by the time that I spent with his work, and I feel confused and confronted by the fact that I believed so heavily in a kind of ideology, worldview, whatever you want to call it, that is so quintessentially in opposition to what I am. And I guess I feel like quite disturbed by it. And so I wanted to talk a bit about it today with the hopes of actually opening up a discussion about it. And I apologize if the title is clickbaity. Yeah. If you're not familiar with what online atheism was about a decade ago, congratulations, you don't need to touch grass. For some reason, during that period of time, it became very, very fashionable, trendy, exciting to watch people like this talk to religious zealots and to deliver almighty rationality, almighty logic, and to dunk on creationists, basically, and anyone else who has religious beliefs.
Well, what an incredibly stupid question.
Nevertheless, I was so invested in this. I had a friend who started a humanist and secular value community at his university, and I was really excited by the idea of getting into this, I guess, sold as like a hyper-intellectual, scientific kind of community that went out into the world and spoke the truth. All of that really led into, I think, what we saw and now see with the sort of early days of the manosphere kind of content, particularly with Jordan Peterson in my case. And so in 2017, on the Sam Harris Wake Up podcast, there was an episode called What is Truth, featuring Jordan Peterson, which I think was the very first time that I ever saw or heard Peterson speak. I was really taken aback by the idea that he spoke about things deeper than a lot of atheists spoke about. I always found new atheism was really a worldview based on critique and deconstruction. And so I didn't really feel like there was a lot to live with inside of with that worldview of new atheism. Really fell in love with the way that Jordan Peterson spoke. He tends to be very charismatic with the way that he talks, and I was immediately in love. I got one of my closest friends into it, and we were off to the races, bucko. Jordan Peterson's worldview opened an idea of religion, particularly Christianity and Judeo-Christian values, up to me at the time, which I particularly fell in love with his lecture series on Genesis, which I have probably watched 6 or 7 times the whole way through, which is saying something because it's not short. All up, I would say I've really consumed, I want to say between 500 and 1,000 hours of Jordan Peterson content in my life. So I'm definitely not someone you would say is new to the content. Very much Jordan Peterson pilled, JPP pilled, Lobster King annihilated. I think a lot of people search for community more so than they search for the ideology that's actually connected with that community, and it sort of ends up all kind of coming crashing down, really. I made a post on a trans Reddit group that about people's experience with this type of content, and so I will share one of the stories now.
My entry point to the alt-right pipeline was atheist content. As someone who was not religious, but was forced into a very religious upbringing, atheist content online felt like speaking truth to power. I latched onto it. And in those days, a video about Richard Dawkins dunking on Christians was 2 or 3 clicks away on YouTube from really hardcore alt-right and MRA talking points. The progression was making fun of how stupid Christians are, to making fun of Islam, to making fun of woke SJWs, to finally hardcore reactionary content. Watching leftist content was eventually what led me to trans people, and after being exposed to the lived experiences of trans people, I began my transition shortly after. That was my experience. The alt-right gave the scared, ashamed, immature high school me answers. The wrong answers, but answers.
The alt-right and the manosphere and the alt-light, I guess, and people a little bit like Jordan Peterson, operate, in my opinion, in a way that is incredibly subtle. I think now conservative values and a kind of pipeline towards further conservative values and masculinity wrapped up in that is kind of cryptic now. It is not the kind of neo waving flag, tiki torch having necessarily. It can obviously, and it does obviously still exist like that, but it has diversified. It is in a new kind of clothing, and I think that is incredibly insidious and something that I fell very, very hard for. In my opinion, one of the most atrocious things that Jordan Peterson has done was the video or Twitter thingy, whatever you want to call it, coming after Elliot Page, dead naming him, and also talking about doctors that perform trans-affirming surgeries as butchers. I find that particularly interesting, given how he has slipped to the right. He'll then use an incredibly far-right example to kind of leverage his bigotry against trans people who are, by and large, so very left in comparison to Jordan Peterson. It just strikes me as particularly what is that point? I do think some of the stuff that has happened with his psychology license and with the Ontario Board of Psychologists coming after him is a great example of how the mighty have fallen. And so I hope deeply that he is stripped of his license, to be honest with you. And it looks a little bit like it might happen. I have no idea. But I want to now talk a little bit about common ground. So I pray every day. I am still kind of a little bit Christian, I guess. I don't really practice, but I do think that has something to do with Peterson, and I do think that I'm better off having that in my life and having it in my life. I struggle a little bit more with the faith now, in the sense of I do view monotheistic Christianity as an incredibly masculine thing. And I do believe the idea of a monotheistic God under Christianity is extraordinarily masculine. The Father, our Lord in heaven. I don't like that a lot, but that is how a lot of religion works, this, regardless of how you flavor it. I think sometimes I do wonder a little bit about the idea of having benefited from some of his teachings. Like, I do now think that a lot of the stuff that he spoke about at the end of the day was stuff that my mum had just been telling me for my whole life, but that I just didn't listen to. Things like cleaning up after yourself, trying to look your best, and trying to do things that make you better, and being goal-oriented. I think, sadly, a lot of these truisms, although they are incredibly deep when you do actually look at them, they are also incredibly easy to be co-opted and used as a kind of straw man, I think, which I think is kind of what he has done. His self-help angle has allowed him to move in a kind of snake eating its own tail, I guess, where you will never know what he really means, and you will never really know the impact of something like this, of some person like this being as famous as he was and is in some sense. I don't think it's the culture's job to soothe the entitled man-childness of a culture that is struggling to rein in its men. I think I have no idea what I just said. I think in some sense I'm like still not really able to make this video, but I wanted to try because there's obviously something in me that still feels so abandoned. I feel like I was thrown out of a truck and spinning down full speed down a hill, like after so many years of devoting myself and defending someone like Jordan Peterson. It makes me feel like I'm now lesser. And I think it ties a little bit into this idea of not knowing how I'm supposed to live down what people would call a male socialization. And to be honest, if I think too much about that, it really upsets me. Sometimes I like to think that maybe some of the basic life skills that I was able to kind of improve on and strengthen through listening to some of the basic advice that Jordan Peterson gave me and that I devoted myself to, perhaps that actually led to me understanding myself well enough to interpret gender questioning and to do the hardest bits of an initial transition as a trans lady. And in a sense, I'm thankful for that. Would I have liked to have gotten that inspiration from a different source? Yeah, I think so. But things are difficult, you know? We are not our past beliefs and our past associations. We can evolve and we can change. We can be better, and we need to be. Part of me hates Jordan Peterson, and part of me doesn't. Part of me wants to like him, and part of me will never. And I guess that's where I'm going to leave it. I hope I touched a little bit on something meaningful. This topic is too big for me. I have to almost talk about an entire decade of my life for this to make sense. But I know I'm not alone. I know there'll be more people that have had an experience like this. And I think the pipeline that radicalizes young people and young trans femmes, I don't know why I just did that. I think part of that pipeline is so subtle and difficult to be aware of when you're young and questioning and in pain. And I think that it's important to know that these people do not care about you. These people are internet strangers. The manosphere will not save you. It is not an echo chamber, it is a tomb. All we have is ourselves and each other. Thank you for watching.
Hi everyone, thank you for watching. I had a lot of fun making this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, share it with a friend, and get off 4chan. Bye bye.
It's quite the bloody catastrophe. It's quite the bloody catastrophe.